наші руки, тому що я щойно побачила, як летить ракета. І я почула це.
Pete, thank you for coming on, my friend.
Always a pleasure, Todd. Great to be here.
So I've got a lot here prepared. Really interesting words yesterday from President Trump. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but I think you wanted to start with the video of General, what's his name?
Petraeus.
Petraeus, yeah, thank you. So I'm going to play that now, and then we'll go from there. So stand by.
Yeah, just to lead in, he's at the Helsinki Security Forum. He was in Kyiv right before that with Kellogg. And so in Kyiv, he was in the Yalta Security Conference. So said mostly the same thing. And this, to our viewers, this is a lead up to what Trump said. We're going to connect it all for you in a couple minutes. So go ahead, Todd, and roll the.
Yeah, because that's important, because what Trump said, I think there's a purpose behind it. We can talk about that in a second.
Yep.
Here we go.
Well, actually, we were also in Kyiv a few months ago for I think that was the Kyiv Security Forum. This was the Yalta European Strategy Group, but also visiting with units that I've been tracking all along, including especially the Nemesis Regiment, which is one of the premier unmanned services units. In fact, I drove their maritime drone 100 kilometers an hour. It's quite spectacular. And I actually felt better after this trip to Kyiv for some reason. That the Ukrainians, I think, are in a better place relative to the U.S. and to NATO and the Western world. But I very much agree with what the ambassador just said in many, many respects, with one exception, and that is that I think that the EU and NATO have done more and more credible actions than I think he was giving credit for. Again, you noted, I was in Brussels. I met with the chairman of the NATO Military Committee, met with a number of EU officials in President von der Leyen's office, and then in the office of the foreign minister, if you will, and so forth. But my conclusion for this group, keep in mind, I'm a former soldier and spy master, not a former diplomat, so this will be somewhat blunt. But my view is that President Trump rightly tried to use his personal relationship with President Putin to bring the killing to an end. He literally rolled out the red carpet, had the big meeting in Anchorage, and Putin has answered by sending the most drones and missiles into Ukraine skies on several different occasions, just keep breaking the previous records, by penetrating Poland's airspace with 19 drones. And I had a great chat with Radek Sikorski, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and other officials there, by violating most recently Estonia's airspace and also Romania's airspace and so forth. And what I think this tells us, when you also take into account his reiteration and Medvedev's constant reiteration of the maximalist demands that Putin wants to achieve. This is not about something that you could split the difference or anything. He wants to replace President Zelensky with a pro-Russian figure. He wants to be given more territory than Russia has actually been able to seize, despite the extraordinary, way over 1 million killed and wounded. He wants to be given the fortified cities of Donetsk, which, again, they can't even get to, much less get through. And they want to demilitarize Ukraine. None of those three can be acceptable to Ukraine, obviously, nor should they be acceptable to us.
So what I'm hearing you say is that Putin has not backed down.
So let's parse that, Pete. What do you say?
Yeah. So, for our viewers, it falls into a lot of themes that we've been discussing. The global propaganda network that is still very clearly, very tightly wound and very coordinated. You hear the same themes over and over, and we're gonna connect those. But just what we've said in the past, the number one way to defeat propaganda is to say out loud the truth, why it's happening, and that's what we're going to do today. He starts off by saying, "I actually feel better about Ukraine, that they're in a relatively better place today than they have been in the past." And he of course, there's never any facts, there's never any because or logic of why. He just like all propagandists, they promulgate hollow statements that have no facts underpinning them. And so if you just look at what's happened just this year, Russia has taken over 5,000 square kilometers from Ukraine, and Ukraine is on a pace this year. They're losing over 30,000 men a month. So last year it was about 20 to 25. They're up to 30,000 now.
I still don't see how you sustain that. I mean,
they can't, and they're running out of people. We have a tape for later in the show of forced conscription. Yeah. So just that alone, as we keep saying, that's why we show them to our viewers. When you're beating the crap out of your recruits just to get them to go into the military, you've missed something. Something is inherently wrong with your formula. The purpose is not there. The message, the communication, the leadership is not believed in, and that's what you see from those forced conscriptions. But let's just keep going. So then he goes into this, after Trump rolled out the red carpet, Putin responded, and this is an incredibly disingenuous little soundbite, by firing the most drones per day that they've ever unleashed. And of course, they've been talking about that, building up to that for a long time. Many of these nights have over 500 drones. Many of those drones are diversionary, so that they can break through the ADA belt. But it's completely disingenuous. And then he says, and they purposely sent over 19 drones to violate Polish airspace, and they also purposeful violation of Estonian airspace. And he says, he throws in, I talked to Prime Minister Sikorski, who, if you follow, that's a prime minister of Poland. He's been all along, obsessively compulsive,
he's part of the
anti-Russian.
He's part of the Tusk globalist crowd.
Now, if he really did talk to him, because this week in Poland, Sikorski's come out and admitted 2 of those drones for sure came from Ukraine. So they're already admitting out of the 4, 2. We showed last week a farmer saying, yeah, they fly in here all the time. The base is right across the border in Ukraine. So proven false. No air traffic control data has come out. The Russians said there were no Russian aircraft in Estonian airspace. No one's produced any ATC radar data to prove it. It's been completely proven false. But remember what we said last week, the 3 steps of psychological manipulation and propaganda. Make a big lie, the bigger the better. Repeat it over and over, global mainstream media, and then pivot off it. Use that lie to pivot to prove other lies, to make statements, other unfounded statements that are only based on that lie. And so that's what you're seeing here. He's pivoting off the lie, which he knows is untrue, about the drones and the Estonian airspace. And he's pivoting to say this is proof that Putin doesn't want to negotiate. And then in the end, he sews it all together and says demands by Russia should not be accepted by Ukraine, and they shouldn't be accepted by us. And to me, that's like a Freudian slip. He's just proving that, that these globalists, they have no love for Ukraine. They're motivated by hatred for Russia. And that's it. And you can hear that in his words, as he says it. So we've shown Kellogg, we've shown him. I think we've
Mhm.
shown Keene, we've shown Hodges, these ex-generals who are very clearly all paid influencers. I would throw this out right now before we get into the Trump stuff. We need a new rule in this country based on these guys. You could name it, you could use their names, that any ex-mil who comments on TV or internet must disclose whether they are being paid and who they're
Yeah.
being paid by. Just
Yeah.
like a doctor can't recommend a drug unless they state up front, I'm
Brought
not
to you by
being paid.
Pfizer.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'll start the process right now and say I'm not being paid by any outside source, and everything you hear from me is just from me. But
We aren't either. Not
I
yet.
know you're not. But that's what we need from these guys, because they're Petraeus especially very clearly. I don't have a shred of respect for him left. It's what he sits there and says and acts like an expert. Remember, this is the guy who sent top secret documents to the woman he was having an affair on, who was also his biographer, while
Yeah.
he was the head of the CIA. So
Yeah.
decision-making, problem solving is clearly not something he's good at. And, he's not good at just being truthful and stating facts, and really disgusting. So he was with Kellogg over there. You've heard that. So let's switch
Before we
now.
move to that, I just want to point out, it's very obvious if you look at the big picture that when did all this drone incursion, airspace violation stuff start? Just recently. And why is that? Because they're losing the damn war. They have to get NATO involved. And that's the worry, right? I mean, they're pushing as hard as they can to get NATO involved, talking about shooting down Russian aircraft. I mean, think about it. Okay, he's violating Baltic airspace. Let's shoot down a MiG-31. I mean, I can see that coming, man.
Yeah.
I mean, they got to get this war going.
No, and you're hitting on it. And the fake, especially, you just take the fake drone incident, the fake Estonian airspace violation.
Mm-hmm.
What they show us all is how obsessively the EU and their globalist allies in the West want to escalate instead of end this conflict.
Yes.
And critically for the rest of us, how recklessly dangerous they've become with their lies and propaganda. And you and your example is the best one.
Mm-hmm.
People don't think that the next world war or a nuclear war will start based on some solid reason, that like we saw the planes fly into the Twin Towers and we know who flew them in. It's not going to be like that. It's way more likely to happen because of some misunderstanding or accident. And the whole shoot down aircraft that violate airspace, you're a pilot. A pilot can get confused. Instruments can go awry. Pilots, we've had pilots flying to the wrong airspace. Remember the Korean Airlines jet that got shot down? That you have to be careful about that, and you have to give the benefit of the doubt, especially when it doesn't make sense. Russia's not going to have two planes over Estonia. Again, what is their motive?
If you look at the airspace, it was way out in the middle of the Baltic Sea. And they alleged that they just clipped while they were and people don't realize there's a Russian exclave called Kaliningrad in Baltics. So they have to support that. And so they fly aircraft around and up through a corridor, and they were alleging they just clipped a little airspace on the corridor. This wasn't over Estonia, as to your point.
Yep.
So anyway,
so very, very reckless and dangerous, and we'll talk again about that in a second when we go over the Trump's Troop Social post.
So where do you want to go next? I've got Kellogg's speech.
You throw Kellogg's on there too, because it just shows it's good, and then we'll go to the Truth Social post by Donald Trump.
Right. This is Russia. They talk a big game, but I don't think they're and I think right now the way the Europeans are standing up, I would be very, very worried if I was a Putin. You know, just a comment. He sometimes rattles his nuclear trigger chain by saying, "Well, we're a nuclear power." I'd remind him, U.S. is too, but so's Britain, so's France, and I'd said just throw it right back at him, and I think you're seeing that with the Europeans standing up right now. It's the Europeans' war because it's the Europeans' backyard and they see it, but it's one of those where we had a discussion recently in the Oval where, you know, it goes back to what I said earlier about, I'm sorry to the ladies in here, right? But they were talking about the primacy of the Russian military and how they were, you know, pretty good. And I said to the people in the room, you know, we'd kick their ass, you know, and I mean by that is like, don't take their statements at face value. They're not as good as Putin says they are, and that I give great credit to the Ukrainian military because they've taken them down a couple of notches, and so I don't think anybody should be afraid of the Russian military. It's a nuclear power. Check that block. I got that, but they don't have. I don't believe they've got the capacity that they had that they can march towards Berlin.
So don't be afraid of the Russian military. They've only got the most nuclear weapons in the world, and you know. And we're not pro Putin. We're just pro truth, dude. That's it. You know, just
Right.
pro truth.
Right. And we'd kick their ass. What does that mean? Explain that to me in military parlance.
Yeah,
This isn't a football game. It's not, you know, a backyard pickup game of basketball. How? Tell me what that means that we'd kick their ass.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he says, you know, they're not to be feared, and they're not what they used to be when they marched on Berlin. And yet the whole purpose, everything they're doing is based on, if we don't stop them now, they're going to march to Europe. So
amazing.
We're going to show this multiple times, but this is a hallmark of liars. Facts cannot stay straight and cannot stay aligned when you're lying. And so these global influencers are lying their asses off. Everything he just said was a lie, and easily proven false. But you know, what is he doing? We could kick their ass, and you're telling that to the Ukrainians, you know, who have been fighting them for 3.5 years and
lost 2 million people.
Right. So you're telling them you guys can't defeat them, but we'd kick their ass. Not, you know, just not well thought out. But this same theme is heard over and over. And to our viewers, about 3 months ago, we had Hodges on here, and that speech right there was given by Hodges. The exact same thing. Don't fear him. Who's this guy, Lavrov? Who do they think they are? You know, and you'll hear the word paper tiger over and over, and we're about to hear and see it again on Trump's Truth Social.
Let me play this. Before we get to that, let me just play this mobilization video real quick and get it out of the way.
Yeah.
More free Ukrainians signing up to fight for their country.
So important.
You know, there's an old Patton quote I was forced to learn: if you can't get them to salute how you want them to salute, and wear the clothes you want them to wear, how are you going to get them to die for their country?
Yeah.
So I mean, this is right there in that quote.
Well, and what you and I say every show is people don't understand. This is all, you know, built on lies. So 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? There's no reason to be fighting. Ukraine should not be fighting. And it's very clear the people of Ukraine, you look at this guy's a young man. He is your ground zero for what should be your frontline soldier, young, healthy, but he ain't going anywhere. And he's fighting off these guys who are trying to shove him into a car. So, you know, and this happens every day. You know, there are tens of these every day, and people film them. Passersby stop in their cars to help out. So this is the Russian people, and remember the latest survey, over 70%, Ukrainian people of Ukrainians want peace. They want the war to end. And that's a good indicator, but we're ignoring that. And that's why you and I show it every week, and why it's so important for everyone in the West to see that. To me, it's the number one indicator species of what's wrong in Ukraine.
And they will be dead in a month, if not 2 weeks. They give them 3 or 4 days of training. Here's how you shoot a gun. They send them to the front against the Russian military, and they're killing 30,000 a month. I mean, think about it. If you're a mother and you see your son taken away like that, never to be seen again.
Yeah.
I mean, just not okay.
No.
Anyway, where do you want to go next?
Let's do that Truth Social. Let's put it up and then talk about it. And I want to go through it because it's a conglomeration of all these propaganda talking points that we've heard just out of these generals, but you hear them out of the EU too.
You want me to read it? It may be.
So let's go through. After getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russian military and economic situation, and after seeing the economic trouble it has caused Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. With time, patience, and the financial support of Europe, and in particular NATO, the original borders from where the war started is very much an option. Why not? Russia has been fighting aimlessly for 3.5 years, a war that should have been taken a real military power less than a week to win. This is not distinguishing Russia. In fact, it is very much making them look like a paper tiger. When the people living in Moscow and at in all the great cities, towns, and districts all throughout Russia find out what is really going on with their war, the fact that it's almost impossible for them to get gasoline through the long lines that are being formed, and all the other things that are taking place in their war economy, where most of the money is being spent on fighting Ukraine, which is great spirit and only getting better. Ukraine would be able to take back their country in the original form, and who knows, maybe even go further than that. Putin and Russia are in big economic trouble. So I want to, at the end of this, talk a little bit about the Donald Trump psychology and, what this possibly means. But what's so important about this to me is this is a aggregation of all of these paid influencer and global propaganda talking points.
Yes.
And just what we said in the beginning, the way to dispel them is to say out loud the facts to prove them wrong right off the bat. And so, in no particular order, just, the original borders. So Trump mentions going back to the original borders. What about the people? Yeah. Anybody who talks about the original borders, just clearly go back up a sentence before that, where he says, and after getting to know and fully understand the Russian-Ukraine military and economic situation. Sir, you cannot fully understand it based on what you just said, because
your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
But then they're sitting eating their dog food, and the family sits down and gets lasagna, and they're like, what is that? And they have this sense like, actually, maybe what I'm eating is shit. Maybe they're getting the good stuff, but you don't really know. And that's why we don't feed dogs to the table, because the second you do, they're done. They're like, really? Beef eyes? I don't think so. I'm not eating that shit anymore, because they know better. And that's what Zin is. Like, the second you have it, you're like, what? Are you serious? I put that shit in my mouth. And you're mad, obviously, at the people who did it to you, but also at yourself for, like, settling for that, for settling.
Because we're not actually dogs.
No, we're not dogs. And, like, why would I be eating beef anus when I can eat?
Because it's impossible to. What we're seeing is, the original borders have already been voted by the people who live there to be part of Russia. So, you would be forcing all of those people from the 5 oblasts to live under a government that tried to kill them and did kill many of their family members for 7 years. That took away, violated UN human rights Article 1 over and over and over for 7 years. No freedom of religion, no freedom of speech, no representation, ability to vote or have representatives in the government, and of course, reckless and aimless artillery barrages on apartment buildings.
Ethnic cleansing. It's
ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
So you can't understand it without understanding that part about the original borders. They're not going back. And then he talks this paper tiger thing, which we mentioned with Petraeus. You heard Kellogg, do his version of the paper tiger. Hodges has done it many times. Keene says it on Fox News all the time. And so I want to just undermine that comment right off the bat, and it's very easy to do. They say Russia is a paper tiger because it's been 3.5 years and they can't defeat a country like Ukraine. Well, let's take the United States. We, and you and I were both part of it, we fought in Afghanistan for 20 years. And at the end of 20 years, we ended up exactly back where we started with no definitive progress as far as the good, freedom-loving people of Afghanistan, liberating them from the Taliban and the Muslim fundamentalists. So we took 20 years in Afghanistan and got nowhere. And they're saying Russia is a paper tiger because after 3.5 years of not fighting Ukraine, whenever anyone ever says they can't defeat Ukraine, stop them and say they're not fighting Ukraine. They're fighting NATO. As we've covered in the past, those are our best and brightest general officers commanding and controlling with all of our best and most cutting edge technology, all of the NATO and US cutting edge technology in tanks, armored personnel carriers, the M1, the Bradley, the ATACMS missiles, all of our radar systems, the Patriots, all of that has not worked. So, when you're talking about a paper tiger, you're being completely disingenuous. And then the second part is, again, what we said, what you heard Petraeus say, and Kellogg, they're not the force that once marched on Berlin. Okay, if they're just a paper tiger, you really believe that, and you must, because you've been saying it nonstop now for a couple of years, then leave them alone. Let them lose to Ukraine, and then tell all the Europeans, hey, you don't have anything to worry about. Russia's a paper tiger. They can't be an existential threat to Europe if they're a paper tiger. So it's one or the other. Again, lies get tangled up. They don't support each other, but you'll never hear them connect those two dots. And then on the Russian economy is the highest gross domestic product growth in all of Europe. It's the only economy with a positive GDP. I think there's one other, and I can't remember if it was Latvia or Estonia, one of the Baltic states. Also, that's it. Now, if you want to get into economies that are hurting, Ukraine has no economy. That's
we're their economy.
Exactly. We're paying their pensions. We're paying their federal government officials. Now just go through the main countries in Europe. Every one of those economies is teetering on recession/depression and upheaval. They're sick economies. They don't have the natural resources to support themselves. Their industries are falling apart. As you mentioned, the global warming farce has caused a lot of that, especially in Germany. But those are the economies that are sick, not Russia's. And the gasoline lines, President Trump, have someone show you, say, hey, can you show me one gasoline line in Russia? This came up a couple months ago.
That's a new one to me. I haven't seen that.
This came up a couple months ago, and again on Telegram, you can find all over the place Someone went around and filmed every gas station for 2 days outside of Moscow. They drove the concentric circles, and not a single gas station had a line in it. So, Russia's economy is doing just fine, and there are no gas lines. So again, someone fed this to Trump, and it turns out before he put this out, he met with Zelensky, and with Zelensky was Kellogg. They had a private meeting after they went to the UN, then they had their private meeting, and then they went to the Oval Office. And Kellogg and Zelensky prepped him the whole time, all of this information. These are the propaganda points. They're no basis in fact. And as dangerous again and reckless as the Polish drone and Estonian airspace violations. And then finally he says Ukraine's getting better. They have great spirit. We hear that all the time too. We heard it from Petraeus. We heard it from Kellogg. We hear it from Zelensky all the time. How? Tell me how they're getting better. Kupiansk is almost surrounded. The Pavlovsk is about to fall. What has Ukraine showed that they're doing better? And they're not doing better. They can't even recruit, and they can't retain because their desertion rates are skyrocketing again. I just saw a new number. Last month they lost 25,000. Remember, they were 19,000 a month. That's 25,000 guys running away from the front lines or running away from training bases. It's unheard of. And by the way, Mod Russia put out, and they've been forthright about this the whole time. So far in 2025, they've got 292,000 new recruits. So that's an average of 35,000 new soldiers a month. Russia has built up a new strategic reserve. That number folds perfectly into it, of 300,000 troops. So, Ukraine barely has that on the front lines of 250 something thousand. So this is a reserve bigger than the number of troops they have on the front line. So nothing in there makes sense.
It's really stunning that the president of the United States, the alleged leader of the free world, would say something like gas lines in Moscow. That ain't happening.
I agree.
It's bizarre.
The paper tiger,
the
paper tiger, the take back its borders. And so, I have a bit of a contrarian take on this. And it's what we just showed is direct evidence that he's being just inundated with lies and propaganda instead of facts. But that doesn't excuse him. He's the CEO. He's in charge. You have to be able to understand when the person talking to you is making it up, is full of crap, or is being completely honest and factual. You've got to be able to discern that. But with President Trump, my thought is, and it's based on the way Russia reacts to this, they don't react. My thought is this is another one of his, in his view, master classes on strategic negotiation.
Yes.
He's come to the conclusion that the media is not going to give him credit or shed any positive light on anything he does. So no matter what he does, it's going to be taken as the worst possible thing that could happen. So he's been confronted by this dilemma: how to get out of Ukraine, how to extract the U.S. out of Ukraine. But he's haunted by what, Biden's reputation, which will live on in infamy for what he did to Afghanistan, and not only his reputation, but the U.S.'s to all countries we've ever assisted and are assisting now, that we'll just turn our back on you and bolt when we get sick of it. And he's been trying to avoid that. And I think he's taken it to a new level. I don't agree with the level, but he's taken it to a new level. He's just said they're not going to cast any positive light on me. The EU is going to constantly work against me. I've got to do this so that it's without a doubt I was on their side. I supported it. I tried everything. I was against Russia. but it didn't work. So we pulled out of there, and everything that happened afterwards was either the credit or fault of NATO and the EU. And I
That's a
think
good
that,
point. Yeah.
yeah, so I think that's what he's doing. I like I said, I do not agree with that. I don't agree with. I feel like he's losing huge credibility around the world because a lot of people understand what's really going on, on the ground, and to some of those statements are so counterfactual that they just make him look bad. And
Well, we're seeing this with him across the board. It's almost been normalized. You look at the Epstein stuff and others, and there's a train of thought that people think that he is forcing, he's putting information out to show people what the narrative is, and then like getting that information out. And like you said, now he's been on the right team now, so whatever happens from now is, as Russia keeps taking ground, or as the Epstein files come out, then he's, I don't know, it's 5D chess, whatever. I mean, that's what people are saying. He's just putting in from. It's a way of exposing, I guess is the right word, the bad actors. I don't know if that's true or not, or maybe he's just under threat. Who knows? But it's interesting to watch.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I see that, and I defer to him because he's, what he's done already is incredible. I'm, as a patriotic American, I'm incredibly grateful to him for what he's done, and the
Yes.
economy, immigration, huge
Climate
high
change.
marks, climate change,
yesterday was huge. I mean,
DEI.
yeah.
Safety and security across the country. So we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but where I differ from him on this, this gamesmanship is, who cares anymore? Who
Yeah.
cares? The media is still railing on Charlie Kirk, the global media. They're still supporting criminals. They're still supporting these illegal aliens and these riots against ICE, who's trying to arrest criminal illegal aliens. His initial premise is correct. It doesn't matter what he does. They're not going to give him credit. They're always going to blame him. And then as far as the EU, every one of those leaders, if you go back and you could open, a lid to look at what was really happening, every one of those European leaders was against Trump and is a pro-Biden, pro-globalist, leftist leader. They all share that common denominator. So there's no real love for Trump in any of them. And they're all going to be gone if you don't need a crystal ball to look at what's happened in Europe, and that the populist uprising cannot be contained. On top of that, Merz, Starmer, Macron are just horrible leaders who make bad decisions. So they're going to be gone. So who cares? Just do the right thing. But again, I'm just gonna state that he's navigated some incredibly complex situations already. I give him credit for that, but that doesn't mean we're not going to call out the falsehoods involved in that statement. And every statement there, like I said, holds no basis in fact. So.
Let's just throw up some of these stuff that came out you sent me over the last day. This one is more what's the word, escalation, I guess, with airspace violations. I mean, that's just evidence of that.
Well, we'll go back to that. So just again, the pivot off the lies. So the pivot off the fake drones into Poland and Estonian airspace is, thus, the number of NATO aircraft in Poland increased by a squadron, 2 from Britain, 4 from Germany, 2 from Denmark. So over nothing. They just used the lie to validate what their countrymen should be saying. What are we doing? You're putting jets. What are they going to do? Engage in aerial combat with Russia? So this is the pivot, and this what makes it so dangerous. Sorry, go ahead.
No, good. This is Mikhail
Yeah.
Mushkin, which is basically saying our economy is strong. We don't have, he didn't say we don't have gas lines, but he's saying the sanctions actually helped us.
But the best, healthiest economy in Europe. So again, you would have thought Scott Bessent would have stopped Trump from saying that. But obviously he didn't get a crack at it. And then globally, the country retains fourth place. And that's them. Under sanctions, they've navigated this and kept their economy healthy.
Here's another one. Zelensky's advisors have lost touch with reality. I mean, that's essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, it's so it could. Zelensky and Trump advisors have lost touch with reality. And remember, many of Zelensky's advisors are Trump's advisors. Kellogg is Zelensky's advisor. And so these guys are delusional, and that's what everyone needs to understand. There's nothing factual about what they're saying, and they're not to be believed. They've been lying the whole time. Don't believe a thing that comes out of any of their mouths.
And here, the issue in Hungary is an interesting one because Trump is trying to, or at least, I don't know if he's actually trying to force them to stop buying Russian gas, but he's highlighting European governments that continue to do business with Russia by third-party cutouts to buy fuel because they've destroyed their own energy supplies. I think Trump is saying, okay, we'll sanction Russian more, but you got to do it first. And they're not going to do it because they can't. This is an interesting point, right?
Yep. And this guy has been one of the, few soldiers of logic, that he's constantly throwing logic into the EU mindset. And here he's talking about what we talked about. Escalation, the potential for escalation, and everyone needs to see that. Everyone needs to know, the war is going to be an accidental, unfounded, caused by a series of events that no one can predict. And what you have to do, you can't predict them. So how do you prevent them? You don't get yourself into these situations. You don't get yourself into an Eastern wall of aircraft, a squadron of aircraft sitting in Poland ready to engage in air-to-air combat, all because of a fake made-up story about drone intruding on Polish airspace. So very good comments by
all right, last one. Ukrainians are getting rich buying property in the U.S. Where do they get this money from, Pete?
Yeah, well, it's the money laundering that USAID, the neutralization, the termination of USAID has revealed to all of us. It was a massive money laundering, and Ukraine, the war and the money that goes into it is a massive money laundering operation. So I don't want to just. This is the Secretary of Security, so like their Secretary of Defense. House is all over. I think he's got eight real estate properties in the USA. So he's making money as a real estate, a renter, an owner, all money that we gave him. There's, the Secretary of Defense of Ukraine doesn't make enough money to buy one house in Florida. So this is what's happening to our money, and this is the corruption on a mega scale that's occurring in Ukraine. And Zelensky's the same way. We've talked about it. We pay his salary. He's made over $1.2 billion in salary alone. Who knows what he's skimmed off the top? For sure, another $1 billion. So he just bought a bank in the UAE. And so that's where our money's going. That's what's happening, not to the soldiers, to these guys, fat, dumb, and happy.
Pete, thank you. You got anything else to get out?
No, that was good, Todd.
All right, we'll see you next week on Ukraine SitRep. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Yep,
All right,
take care.
Take care.